Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ave Explores Live. We are back for another awesome conversation about Catholicism around the world. What does the church look like globally? What does the church look like in my own particular 70605 zip code? What does the church look like in Africa? What does the church look like in Italy, in England, in Ireland, in South America, across the globe? What is the church doing? How is the church acting? What is the church taking on as far as different ministry opportunities? And most importantly, what does the faith look like lived on the ground? If I were to hop off the plane in India, what would I see? We actually had a podcast episode about that last week with a young man I've had the privilege of knowing through ministry stuff, Percival Holt, and his description of the church in India was vibrant, alive, noisy. We have a conversation coming up later in the series about the church in Ireland and what the church looks like in Ireland, especially with pilgrimage ministry and how that's a huge part of bringing people kind of back into the fold of the faith. The whole point of our Ave Explores Catholicism Around the World series is to show you the church up close. Not by, literally going to these places. Thanks, COVID. I couldn't hop on a plane for all of this and go to all these different countries, but to have conversations with people who are from there, to have conversations with people and ask them, what's the church look like over there? What's your favorite part about being Catholic in your country? How do you worship? What are some challenges that you're facing? And I'm so excited today to have with me a young priest, a priest of only 3 months from Cameroon, serving in the church in England, the Catholic Church in England, not the Church of England. Father Limnyuy Gamsi is joining us today, all the way from England. It's well past noon over there. It's dinner time where he is. So he has graciously joined us for this Ave Explores Live conversation. Father, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Katie.
So we connected on Twitter, which is, I think, my favorite way to find people for Ave Explores is just to kind of scroll through. And I was so captivated by things that you've shared, your young priesthood. Tell us a little bit about who you are. If I bumped into you in an elevator, who would I have just met and what would I learn about you?
Thank you. So I'm Father Limnyuy Gamsi. I've been a priest for 3 months now, since the 5th of December. And it's been great. It's been weird, not what I'd been planning for my 7 years when I was in seminary, but it's been amazing. And after traveling up and down in my youth, it's nice to be a priest and be a bit more stable than I've been a bit more in the past. Yeah.
So you alluded to my first question there. You've traveled a lot. Tell us a little bit about kind of the zoomed out 10,000-foot view story. You're from Cameroon in Africa. You are a priest in the Diocese of Nottingham in the central part of England. What's the story there? How have you gone back and forth all over the world? What's the story?
So I was born in Cameroon, and then I came to England. And when I was about 7, my parents had just moved to England. So my siblings and I followed just after that. But then when I finished primary school, so when I was 11, my parents asked me to go back to Cameroon to go to secondary school there. And I had no idea of what to expect. I'd been away for 4 years, which now doesn't seem long, but back then it's like I'd been away forever. I only recognized 1 or 2 people. And it turned out to be a minor seminary, so a Catholic boarding school for those who wanted to be priest. When the rector asked me, do you want to be a priest? I thought it was a strange question and said no. But he allowed me to stay. And those were really my formative years. I went from being a pedestrian weekly mass attending Catholic to a monastic lifestyle of mass every day, prayers every day. And it was during those 5 years that I grew in my faith, but also during the holidays, I stayed in Cameroon. It's only in the summer when I came to England. So during holidays, and when we'd be allowed from seminary to mix with the local community, I just saw a different world to what I'd grown up with in England. And I heard the call to the priesthood while I was there. And then after 5 years, my parents asked me to come back to England to help out with my little brother, who was still quite young back then. And when I was in sixth form, when I was 17, I applied for seminary for my Diocese of Nottingham here. And I got accepted. But the craziest traveling period for me is, so between 2011 and 2014, when I left Cameroon, came to England for 2 years. My first year in seminary was in Spain because the English Bishops' Conference has a seminary there. And then I came to Birmingham. So in 3 years, I lived in 4 cities across 3 continents, and it was mad looking back on it. So it is nice to be a bit more stable now. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I want to hear about all these places. First up, Cameroon. So you are born there, you're raised there up to the point of 7, you arrive in England, and then you go back. Tell me about Cameroon. I don't know much about the country other than the name. So what's it like? And then we'll dig into what the church is like.
Yeah, so Cameroon is in West Africa, just north of the equator, and it's called Africa in miniature just because it's not, it's very different. England is flat, almost the same throughout, but Cameroon is just very different. When you land, there are 2 national airports. One of them is very near the coast. It's sea level, it's incredibly humid. When you come out of the plane, the heat smacks your face. It's just so humid. But the part where I was born, it's 8 hours away from the airport. And you can feel when you're traveling there, you're just climbing. You're climbing most of the way there. And when you get there, it is freezing. So culturally, it's different in that sense, but also it's English and French. So it's majority French because of the colonial history, but I'm from the English part. And it does feel like 2 different countries. The French gave their part, their customs. The English did the same as well. So yeah, it is quite different, but I really enjoyed it just because it was just a different world. They say the British are cold, and it's not that I went from a cold culture to a much warmer culture, but I left in primary school. I didn't really do much. I went to school, met up with friends, didn't do much beyond that. So to go from that to living with 200 people was a drastic change. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. You're in this boarding school, minor seminary in Cameroon. What does the church look like in Cameroon? I mean, you're mentioning this warm culture. Has some of the, I'll use the buzzword, the colonization from the French and the British affected the church there? Has the local culture been able to overcome that and bring the church to life in its own way there?
Yeah, so the church is very much alive. I was looking at statistics just before this, and I was actually surprised to see that Cameroon, well, it's 70% Catholic, Christian, which doesn't surprise me, but it's not evenly distributed. The north of Cameroon is heavily Muslim. If you've heard of Boko Haram, that's where they work. And I met a Mill Hill missionary who said he worked in the north of Cameroon. And if anyone said they wanted to become Christian, they sent them south straight away because they wouldn't tolerate any conversions at the north. Cameroon is about 40% Catholic, again, which surprised me because the culture just seems to be Catholic, certainly Christian. When I've been back a few times since I left, and it hits me every time. Bus agencies, one of them is Psalm 23 Express, there's Vatican Express, and these are secular bus agencies. And when you're traveling from my area to where the national airports are, there's always someone in the coach at the beginning saying a prayer. Whether you're Christian or not, There's a pastor there who is saying a prayer. So it is very much culturally Catholic, but not in the sense when we talk about it here, we mean people just grew up in it and were sort of carried along. But there, when you say the culture is Catholic, culture there means a very different thing to how we use it here. Your culture, it's who you are. It's your very being. So the traditional culture has coexisted quite well with the English part. There is in Cameroon a lot of civil unrest now between the English and the French part, but as far as the traditional culture goes, I remember in our cathedral in my home diocese, the Fon, who's the leader of our tribe, he has his own chair in the cathedral. It's like a throne, it's massive, and he is there for masses, he receives communion. The Fon is Catholic, and a Fon of a different tribe. His son is a priest. He was one of my friends when I was in minor seminary. So the culture and the church have gotten on very well. And when there are issues to be hashed out, you get the bishop, the mayor, and the Fon, and they're the main 3 people. So there is a remarkable harmony between all of that.
Yeah. I want to hear a little bit more about that. So we often hear this word tribe. What does that mean in Cameroon? What does that look like? You're using this term. I want to make sure I say it correctly. The Fon, is that the leader of the tribe? Tell me a little bit about that.
That's right, yeah. So the Fon is the leader of the tribe. And tribes I heard in Cameroon, there are thousands of tribes, which surprises me a bit because tribes are very, very different. One of my friends gosh, I don't know how to describe this now. I guess one tribe would be just one part of a large city, whereas my tribe covers basically the whole diocese, and my tribe is fairly big. I remember being 8 hours away in the capital, and I got into a taxi with my cousin, and the taxi driver had his name tag, and from his name we could see he was from our tribe, and we just started talking to him in a native language. So your tribe is your... I have had a few priests clash over sort of tribe or religion, and one priest here from Cameroon said if the Fon called him to go back to have a meeting, he would go back as soon as he could, because the Fon is essentially the leader. Most priests wouldn't go that far, but your tribe is your first identity. Obviously, being Christian is your first identity, but your tribe controls everything. In terms of, some people are Catholic, some are Christian. We have a lot of Muslims in our area as well. But what unites us, what unites the people in the same geographical area is your tribe, in a way that it certainly doesn't in England. And I don't have that sense in the Western world. Yeah.
So it's community, it's gathering together for fellowship, for friendship.
Yes, and it's very social. So a lot of the passages in the Bible, when I'm preaching on them, I just think of my tribe. The passage where Jesus says, if someone does something wrong, correct him privately and then take two people. That would resonate a lot more with those in Cameroon, because you know everyone in your village. They still do marriage bans. They call out names in church because you will know who they're talking about. You assume people know. And ordination bans, they're still called out because you will know not everyone in your tribe, but certainly those in your area. And in England, we have those from my tribe in Cameroon who live in England, and we have a massive group. It's called Banning, which means sort of get together. And there's a very strong link here. And I know in the States, those from my tribe there, they're doing a lot of work, a registered charity. They do work back home, but also, you know, a community you have here which you can fall back on is your tribe, those from your tribe who are here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you go to England do you move back home with your family after spending this time at the boarding school, the minor seminary in Cameroon? You felt the call, this desire to be a priest. What compelled you to want to be a priest in England and not back in Cameroon?
Yeah, so my parents had been in England while I was in Cameroon. They'd stayed here. And it was in my 4th year there when I sort of heard almost conclusively that this is what God is calling me to do. And a big part of me did want to stay in Cameroon. I just loved it. I'd become comfortable there. But my parents asked me to come back to England, partly to take care of my younger brother, who is 8 years younger than me. So he would have been about 7 or 8 at the time. But I think I would have come to England anyway, just because I'd grown up in England, sort of between 6 and 11. And because when I was in Cameroon, I was never really part of my home diocese. I was in the sense that the seminary was there, but there were people in the minor seminary from all over Cameroon. And during holidays, I think on my mum's side, there were 9 of them. Some have passed away. On my dad's side, there are more than that. So during Christmas and Easter holidays, I'd go to a different part of the country each time to stay with one uncle or one aunt. So even though that was my tribe and my diocese, I never really felt part of it to the sense to want to stay there for the rest of my life. I was very much, even among the seminarians, the British guy, the guy from England. And I came back to England every summer. And the Cameroon summer holidays are 14 weeks. So from the end of May to September, I was here. And I very much remained British. Yeah. So that's why I came back and applied here. Yeah.
So what did you notice maybe was the biggest difference from that experience of the Cameroon seminary, studying for the English Catholic Church in the English seminary? What were some of those huge differences that you noticed?
So it took a while just to get used to things, because when I came back when I was 16, I was in sixth form, so call it high school for 2 years. And I just really went to church. My church, when I was in primary school, even when I was in high school, we just went there for mass. We might have done an ad hoc thing here and there, but it wasn't really, it was a mass center and not much else. So it's only when I went to seminary and then started doing outreach from seminary that I started encountering the church in England properly. And at first, it was bleak. It was very bleak. Even just in seminary, I was surprised because from minor seminary, you just went to major seminary. If someone went off to university, odds are they weren't coming back. That's how we saw things there. So I was surprised. It just happened when I was applying for seminary. The other two guys were both 18 as well. So I thought, this is how things work here. So I was surprised to see seminarians in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it was a bit of a bleak image. And for a while, I was very much in the maintenance mindset of, gosh, we need to keep what we've got here. Otherwise, it will just completely crumble. But I did get a lot more positive when I met people my age, the local university to the seminary. I went there for a talk and realized that this is the sort of community I'd been looking for. But the stark differences still remain. I remember when I went to Cameroon when I was 11, before I started minor seminary, on the Sunday, I got out my stuff to go to church, and my cousin looked at me in my jeans and t-shirts and he said, "We don't wear that to church here. You're going to stand out." And when I went to church, I saw what he meant. Like in Cameroon, Sunday best still means Sunday best. People wear suits, all sorts of colorful African attire because it is Sunday. More Sunday, the first mass is 6:30. The second mass is about 9 because you want to leave enough time. And you can arrive to church 30 minutes late and it's not the gospel yet. It just means a lot more. People make a lot out of it. And Sunday is a very holy day. People tend not to work. And there was even a point where the Sunday market moved to church. Priests tried to stop it, but the sellers knew that if you want to get people on a Sunday morning, you go to church. Whereas, yes, it's not the same thing here. Services are, I remember reading them, I think it was Divine Renovation, where he said, I think it was Father James Mann, he said he studied scripture, studied the magisterium, and he's never come across the commandment that Sunday Mass has to be 1 hour. He said he's never seen it, but it is like a rule that we live by. Whereas in Cameroon, it just, Mass can be longer or shorter depending on what's going on that week. Yeah.
That tracks really well with we interviewed a seminarian from Kenya who just said in general in Africa time stops when you are in church. Doesn't matter what country you're in, that your time is given to God, and that could be an hour, it could be 4, but everybody's okay with that. You wrote in your dissertation, you were sharing with me, so you're studying for the priesthood. You have these two very distinct cultural experiences of the church in Cameroon, the church in England, and you wrote about the common priesthood. Can you tell us a little bit about that huge distinction you noticed of the common priesthood between Cameroon and between England?
Yeah, so at first I didn't know what the common priesthood was or anything like that. I only learned it when I was in seminary, but I did get the feeling that in Cameroon, assisting at church, and whether it was being an altar server in a choir, it's just something that you did. And again, not from a cultural mindset of we have to go. It's something you did. The altar servers, you have a rota, you might serve Mass 3 or 4 times a year because there are so many people on the rota. But the sense I got in parishes here, and it is a bit of a generalization, the sense I got was that here, it's something you were asked to do. It was a step up. Your normal thing was to come and worship and then go. And then Father asked you to do something extra by asking if you could read or to be an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion. So when I was reading about the common priesthood, it verbalized what I'd been thinking within myself, that yes, this is it. It's something which we're called to do by virtue of being baptized. My first Mass, my first homily as a priest happened to be on Gaudete Sunday. And the first reading was Isaiah. The Spirit of the Lord has been given to me. The Lord has anointed me. And I remember saying how a Christian who doesn't want to evangelize, who doesn't want to do more than we tend to do here, it's a contradiction, because a Christian is someone who is anointed to do all of that. So I picked the topic for my dissertation just to look a bit more into it and what the church means when the church says you have a common priesthood. Because like I said, yes, here it's the norm is just to go to church and then leave, and then anything else is more. It's more demand on your time, which the church doesn't really have a right to. Yeah.
So as folks are watching, if you've got any questions for Father Lim, please put them into the chats and we'll get that to him to give him the chance to answer. So I want to dig into that a little bit more. This common priesthood, this command to preach, to share. How do you think that's happening uniquely within the church in Cameroon and maybe even in Africa in general?
So in the church in Cameroon, and I'd say, so in terms of generalizing Africa, I know West Africa is often spoken of in a block, just in the sense that certainly Nigeria and my part of Cameroon, the English colonized it. Other parts of West Africa, Ivory Coast, the French were there. But I know certainly Cameroon would be different from, let's say, Kenya or Ethiopia, which are on the east. But in terms of it being concrete in Cameroon, there is that acknowledgement that, so even one thing I really, which gives me joy when I think about it, is that from those of us who started in Cameroon, those of us who started in my year group, there were 32 of us, and only a few of us, single digits, are in seminary. But when I see my friends on social media, they're sharing a lot of religious posts. You can see, we always said, you pass through seminary, seminary has to pass through you. They've not become priests, but they did really soak in the culture of what they were being taught. So even though, again, they wouldn't say it explicitly, but they witness, they evangelize. And one thing I saw in the dissertation, which I didn't know much beforehand, was that you live out your common priesthood. A lot of people think it is just what people are doing in church, and that's what spurred me on to research it at first. But the reading I saw said there is the part in church, the sanctifying office, but there's also the prophetic office, and it's prophecy, which we think means speaking and predicting, but it's prophecy in terms of being a witness. It doesn't mean speaking. And the laity are, some people criticize them, the council, for defining the laity as those who aren't religious and aren't ordained. You're sort of everyone else. But then one theologian wrote and said, it's not a slight at all. It's saying that because you're not, cabined might be the right word, but because you don't have these obligations, you're the ones that people see in the workplace, that people see in school, and you're the ones who are prophets to them in the way that priest can't. And then there's also the reigning office, the kingly office, in terms of your sacrifices, your sufferings, offering that up. And again, you see that in Cameroon to an incredible extent. It's no coincidence that poorer countries where there is more suffering tend to be more religious, because you know you have to fall back on something and you channel your suffering in a very positive way. So again, they wouldn't in Cameroon say it explicitly like that, but they do live out the common priesthood in all those three offices, just to a natural degree. Whereas I'm here, and this was the conflict I saw in my dissertation. Many people said John Paul II in the 90s, especially in Christi Fideles Legi, his document on the lay people in the church, that he was restricting ministry. He was restricting the common priest, so that the council had said lay people can, exercise ministry and exercise the priesthood. But John Paul said, but you have to do it in the right way. And many said, no, it means, I can remember one anecdote I read where there was one parish in America. They'd had services of the word and Holy Communion. And when the priest came back, they said, oh no, we want Mary to carry on her services because Mary gets us. There's a better connection there. And what John Paul was trying to say then was that, no, that's not what the common priesthood is. It's a lot broader than that. And I guess, yeah, when you're living it out in other aspects of your life, then it makes sense to volunteer and live it out in church in the same way. But yeah, I guess it's not really emphasized that much in other areas. I was surprised, again, comparing Cameroon and England. When I came back to England and started seminary and went into schools, I'd never been to an English secondary school. I completely missed out ages of 11 to 16. So it was all very new to me. And I was surprised when priests and chaplains were saying, we can't get people to serve mass. There are 1,000 people here, but we can't get a server. Because in minor seminary, you'd serve twice a year and you'd practice for it. You would rehearse, because it was such an honor to serve and to help in the liturgy. So yeah, it was really a culture shock for me just to see that the stress wasn't there. That it was you do it in church, but you don't want to cramp your style when you're with your other friends.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I definitely think in the States we're more of the the English version of that. At least some people. I mean, the joke in the States, I think, is 20% of the parish does 80% of the work, as far as folks who are engaged, who are active. So it might look from the outside looking in, there's a lot of lay people that are engaged, but in reality, it's the same few families that are doing all of those external ministries, or who engage in that bigger service, as you're mentioning. Father, you talked about you've ping-ponged around. You've gone from Cameroon to England. You spent some time in Spain. How did you put it? 4 countries on 3 continents in 4 years?
So it was 3 years. It was 4 years, 4 cities, 3 countries. Yeah, I can't remember the specifics now.
Yeah,
but
a lot. I mean, more than me, who has lived in 3 places my entire life. I've traveled a lot, but actually living in a place and learning a culture. The whole point of this series is to zoom out and to look at the church as a whole. What have you learned? Maybe how has your priesthood been helped by seeing the church from the Cameroonian perspective, from the English perspective, spending time in Spain? What has that given you as a young priest?
It's given me hope and a much broader perspective. I love here as in England, when people are quite just dour and pessimistic, I always say how worldwide the church is growing. There is the tendency to think what happens here is what happens everywhere. But I don't know if it's still true this year, but certainly the last few years, the number of vocations worldwide has been going up. Africa and Asia have been offsetting our losses. And when I went to Cameroon in 2016, half the seminarians were younger than me, and that just blew me away. So it does certainly give me hope that we're not here alone. And one thing I should have mentioned, one of the nuances about the church here in England is immigration is a big thing, which is a big positive for us. Leicester, we have a lot of so the Syro-Malabar Rites, which is mainly originally located in India, because I think the 60s in Uganda, Idi Amin just sent all of them out, and England took a lot of them. Many of them came to Leicester, so we have their presence here. And the other main group here are the Polish. I think it was 2004. Poland entered the European Union, and many of them again came here. So on one side, they have their own chaplains, they have their own churches, they do their own things. But on the other side, many of them do interact with us, and many of them do join us. And again, it's just remarkable to see with them how differently they view things. Yes, when I'm at the sanctuary and I see people who don't come up for communion often, I can just guess that they're Polish, just because if you've committed the slightest sin, you don't go. So it is just hopeful, and it just helps to broaden my horizons, just to think that this isn't all there is, and things are better, and things can get better here, especially with those who are coming from outside. And even Spain, I was surprised at how Catholic Spain was. I don't know the stats for it, and I know compared to Africa and Asia, it's not great, but one of the things I loved there was that they have lots of processions in Spain for Holy Week. They are known for them. And we had a statue of Our Lady, and we took part in a procession as well. And we would carry the statue on a float and come out of the church, turn left. And ours was Mary meeting Jesus. Some people carrying Jesus would come and meet us, and we would reverse back into the church. And every Holy Week, the council would build a ramp because it was pavement onto the road. The council would build a ramp for us just for that night, then remove it soon after that. So there is still something there. So it gives me a lot of hope that things certainly can get better, because I've seen, and thankfully now as a priest, I can go back to Cameroon more often. I've seen it work. This message we're trying to preach to people, we're not trying to rip people off. It is a message that many people are buying and really believing. So if we can do that there, then it's something which we can do here as well.
That's really encouraging. Seeing the church globally gives you hope. I love that. Father, where can we follow you and see your adventures as a young priest?
So it's mainly on Twitter. That's where I tweet about various things which happen, which are normal in a parish, but to me, I just find them so surprising. So I am just Limnyuy Gamsi, as I am here on Twitter, and I am semi-active on Instagram as well.
Awesome. Well, hopefully folks will go find you. We'll, of course, tag you when we reshare this on IGTV and online in our email. Thank you so much for being with us today, Father.
Thank you for having me.
that answer there at the end, I think, is really the crux of what we're talking about with this whole Ave Explores Catholicism Around the World series, that when you see the church from a global perspective, it brings you hope. When you travel, even if it's just out of your own immediate diocese, you are encouraged, I think, to see what's happening elsewhere and to know, and this, I think, is the real heart of it, to know that we're not alone, that what's going on in the church in Cameroon, what's happening in the Diocese of Nottingham and Leicester, where Father is, what's happening in Lake Charles, Louisiana, that we're unified in that worship of Jesus Christ at the altar, that we're unified in the Eucharist, that we're unified in that common priesthood, like Father was talking about, with this call to serve, to actively engage and evangelize. But even more importantly, that if one area might be lacking in one particular spot in the world, that there's another spot in the world that can maybe pick up that slack, and that universal, that give and that take of serving the church is very much something that I think we all benefit from seeing, from knowing, from learning about. Father Lim is a great follow on Twitter. I would highly encourage you to click on over and to find him there and to see his adventures. There's always something really encouraging about watching a young priest learn what it means and looks like to live life as a young priest. And he shares very beautifully about those experiences, his encounters with parishioners, his thoughts as he's preparing his homilies. So please go follow him on Twitter. Ave Explores Catholicism Around the World still has more content being churned out just for you. This week, we have a couple of excellent episodes with Sean Forrest talking about the orphanage that he has founded and runs in Haiti, and about the Catholic faith and the Catholic Church in Haiti, and a conversation in our podcast with a seminarian, soon to be priest, Samuel Maina, about the church in Kenya. And then next week, we'll be digging into what the church looks like more in Europe, in England and Rome and Ireland, different places that can show us the church there and how the church is alive. You can find all of that content on avemariapress.com. So click on over there. There's a spot right at the top that says free resources. You can find all of the content that we've created, articles, videos, podcasts, social media exclusives, all just for you. Sign up to get the email straight to your inbox. Next week, we'll be back for another Ave Explores live conversation with one of my favorite people in the world, Sister Emanuela, or as she likes to call herself, one of the Green Nuns. And she'll be joining us from Rome to share with us a bit about the ministry of the religious order that she is in, as well as what it was like to grow up in the church in England, similar to how Father Lim talked about, but also what it's like now to, pre-COVID times, bring people from around the world through tours of the Vatican museums and help them see the church come to life through the art and the architecture of the church, and hear their stories as Catholics from around the world coming to the Eternal City. So we'll be right back here at noon next Tuesday on the Ave Maria Press Facebook page or IGTV if you're watching it after the fact, for that conversation with Sister Emanuela. We're so grateful that you joined us today. Thanks so much for being with us, and we will see you soon.